I used to be the lost boy running insane. I used to be the ghost boy looking for fame. I used to work so hard to get it, so hard to get it. I used to be the one living in the fast lane. I used to be the one who only cried in the rain. I used to work so hard to get it, and so hard to get it. And so hard to get it. I used to be the lost boy running insane. I used to be the ghost boy looking for fame. I used to work so hard to get it, so hard to get it. I used to be the one living in the fast lane. I used to be the one who only cried in the rain. I used to work so hard to get it, and so hard to get it.
What's up, buddy? Are we live? Oh snap. Look at that guy, got the Michigan gear in the background, ready to go. My team's coach just signed with somebody else, so you know. Brian Kelly is leaving us. Former Grand Valley coach Brian Kelly.
What's up, everybody? My mic's muted. Sorry. I'm trying to get figuring out here how to get this guy to come in. How did I do this? Did I really do an OBS link?
Seems interesting, Adam.
What?
Hello. All right. Oh, it's because I already have the microphone through. Here, hold on one second.
Alright.
I gotta turn off my mic here. Or turn off my camera here.
Okay. Maybe it's not that link. Maybe. Oh, whoa. My stuff just went weird. Let's see if I can. All right, Kit, you gotta go. Sorry.
All right, there you go. If you want, should be good.
Everything is like green and pink. Maybe it's not this room. Screen share with room? No. I don't need to join the room. I totally lost the link.
Confirmed Notre Dame fan? Absolutely, Galaxy.
What about... Can you try... Go to obs.ninja.
Yeah, I'm in that thing. I started it up for you.
I know. Don't go to that.
You just want me to go to obs.ninja?
Yeah, and like there's like this there's a button that says like add camera to OBS. Maybe you get a link there. Do you get a link?
All right. Here you go. Copy.
Let's try this.
Bam. Here you go. It's for you.
All right, let's try this. Let's see if it happens.
Look at us boomers trying to work technology over here.
I know. This is rough. Hey! It works. Okay. Let's go. Oh, dude. All right, Bilski. What's up? How's
What's
it
up,
going?
man? It's going good. It's going good. We open up our Laker Esports Center tomorrow, so I'm really excited to finally kind of like get that open and have students in there. We've had students kind of like with a soft opening type thing, test stuff out, and just the energy in there has been amazing. Like I
Yeah.
get so energized being around students, and so I'm excited to have this thing fully open and ready to go.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. So Chris Bilski, little background on Chris. Chris just started as the director of esports at Grand Valley State University, like one of the largest D2 schools in the country, like 35,000 students or something crazy, in Grand Rapids. Well, Allendale. Do they say Grand Rapids or do they say Allendale?
Say Grand Rapids.
Okay.
I mean, we do have a Grand Rapids campus, so.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair. But yeah, started this fall, opening up an esports lab. What does that lab look like? Paint us the picture.
Ooh, so imagine if you had no budget and you're like, I want to put the best of the best in a space. That's what we have at the Laker Esports Center.
Like you had budget is like money is not a number.
Money's not a number.
Money is not a number.
For our Grand Valley students, we can do nothing but the best.
Oh,
So we've got the Herman Miller
I don't
chair.
need the GVSU sale, but okay, Herman Miller, nice.
Herman Miller chairs. We've got the Alienware premium top of the line computers with the 3080 graphics cards in them. We've got the
Dang.
Herman Miller desk, the stand sit with just a light touch of a button. Everything in there is just premium. Like,
All right, that's awesome. I'm gonna cut you off because we have our first chat question
okay.
from Coach Evolve, asking real topic of the day: will any of the directors in Michigan ever be as handsome as Cody at Northwood? I think this is the person who asked this. First of all, that's a leading question. Second of all, you're biased in asking this question.
Maybe eventually, every looks eventually fade, right?
Oh,
so
okay. So instead of us getting more attractive, well,
yeah,
the
right.
other coaches in Michigan since I've left, he's gonna get less attractive. Okay, that's fair.
Give it 20, 30 years. We might catch him. Somebody will catch him.
That's fair. That's fair. So you got this pretty sweet lab. When's the grand opening?
So we're opening to the campus community tomorrow at noon.
Okay.
So I'm really excited to do that. It'll just, like I said, it'll be good. I've been here working on this for a few months now. The lab itself has been being built longer than that. So it's just, to see it finally open and kind of the culmination of all the work that's gone into it, really exciting.
That's awesome. But it wasn't all sunshines and rainbows. So let's start talking about starting a new program. Like, all right, so you've done it now twice. Still in the process in the second one. I've done it once. I'm taking over a program now, so I'm not starting a new one. But let's start talking about some of those. Let's skip the boring stuff that most panels cover. Let's talk about like what learnings have you never heard of or isn't advertised about starting a new program. Like what are some of the big takeaways that you've learned? What are the tips and tricks going now your second time?
I think it's important to understand your school, the student body, and kind of the region as a whole. They say like every school is a little bit different. I think that's really true. So kind of understanding and researching what your students are interested in, what students in the area are interested in, because I think that's really important as well. I don't agree with this like kind of, one size fits all plan for starting a school at a university or high school, right? I think that everything has to be tailored to that specific school.
That's both great points. What does that look like when we'll look at the differences, let's say between Muskingum where you started prior and now GVSU? What do those look like differently?
So I'll give you an example. So Muskingum was in Southeast Ohio where the internet wasn't the best in the region as a whole. And on top of that, it wasn't like the most wealthy, well-off region, right? So what I found is that I had a lot of players coming to Muskingum who were actually console players rather than PC players were therefore there. So I had this influx or kind of a abnormal amount of players for games like Overwatch, right? Because it could be played on console as well as being played on PC. So, you might find that there are certain games that are more popular at your school or university than possibly at other schools and universities, just based on kind of the profile of the university itself.
How does that feel with your background being mainly in League of Legends? Like, how was it to come into a place where like League of Legends wasn't going to be your top title? Like,
I think that a lot of times we as directors, maybe not a lot of times, but there are times where we as directors kind of try to force our favorite games into our programs, right? It's something that we know and we love, so we want to see it be a big part of wherever we're at, right? But ultimately, if your goal is to serve the students, you kind of have to meet the students where they're at. And to me, that means, if there's a lot of interest in a certain game or not a lot of interest in a certain game, maybe like you use League of Legends example, if there's not a lot of interest in League of Legends, maybe you don't feel the team in that game, right? Even if it's close to your heart, and it's something that you personally feel like you're very knowledgeable about. It's about what the students are looking for and what best serves the students.
so coming from small school in Ohio to now big school, Grand Rapids, Michigan, what are the biggest differences? Like right off the first 2 months of being there, 3 months, like what have you discovered biggest differences?
I think the first one is just kind of how nimble my program was at Muskingum. If I wanted something done, I had a lot of ability to do things very quickly. Here at Grand Valley, and I think this is the case at a lot of larger institutions, right? There's more channels you have to go through to get things approved and get things done. Whereas when I got to Muskingum, they kind of, handed me the keys and said, drive this. And I was able to make a lot of decisions, big and small, on my own when it came to the esports program.
Okay. Fair. Questions in chat. What are your priorities when establishing a new program? I've only ever worked in the club space. Would be interesting to hear the basics. Question from Mega Blaziken, who's down in Florida, or was, or is, or you'll have to let us know, Mega, what you're up to. I can't keep up with all these rock stars in the space. But what are your priorities?
So when I'm looking at what are my overarching goals, I mean, once again, I think starting with the baseline of, focus on student, I'm looking to create opportunities for students to develop as individuals and to develop in a career way as well. So those are some of the things that I'm really big on when it comes to my programs. I'm looking for, I see my arena or my esports center as just kind of another classroom when it comes to my students, right? I'm teaching them soft skills and how to be good teammates and things like that. And then I'm also trying to use my programs as a way to help them develop their portfolios or build on, career skills that they'll be able to carry with them as, after graduation. So trying to focus and shape a program that allows those opportunities for students, I think is really big for me. Making sure that you have the right resources to sustain your program as a whole, I think is important. A lot of people want to come in and do all these things at once, but it's okay to start small sometimes and just do those things well and then grow out from there.
Yeah, I agree. I think one thing I've learned kind of over the past couple of years is like you don't have to instantly sprint working 80 hours a week and trying to accomplish every goal you want to accomplish in the first semester. I think that's where people get burned out. That's where you kind of do lackluster across the board instead of being really good at a couple things first and building up. I think that's a really good point. Thank you, Mega. Mega, I know you by Jordan. Jordan's the club president at Florida State. I'm sure they have a lot to talk about when it comes to student programs and stuff. Which kind of raises a question here from Pretty Funky Monk, who I might know. But it says his question was, GVSU had a pretty robust student-run club scene the past few years. What approach did you take to building on that, and how does it change your strategy, if at all? I think this is an interesting question because we've talked about this a lot. And I think I'm gonna premise this by taking the heat myself in the fact that sometimes these clubs can shift from being a well-run machine one year to very discombobulated the next year because people graduate or leave or etc. So with that in mind, how have you approached it? Like what are your kind of key learnings so far?
So when I came to Grand Valley University, my goal was to kind of set up these three pillars of esports at Grand Valley. The first being the campus community pillar, so esports for everyone. The second being the club pillar, which is, esports as it's based around the student club on campus. And then the last one being the competitive pillar. So, those university supported and funded teams that travel and officially represent the university. So I think each of those three pillars is extremely important to the health of esports on your campus as a whole, and that there's opportunities within each of those pillars that are unique to them. When I came to Grand Valley, I met with the student club, and to me, I think it's really important to have a student-run organization on campus. I told them I'm not here to manage you. I'm here to advise you, here to help you. I'm not trying to take over your club. I think it's great that you have a club run by students where they have leadership opportunities to, once again, help grow and develop as individuals, right? And so I'm a big fan of having student clubs based around esports on campus. It's exciting to see, we do have the term was robust. We do have a robust student club already at GVSU. And it's been exciting to see how that progresses. I mean, even over the past few months that I've been here, it's been continuing to grow and develop and change. And we've brought in certain games that weren't there before. So, yeah, it's exciting. And I think that there's a really important place for student esports clubs on campus.
Nice. Sean is in chat. What's up, Sean? He asked something that might be a little bit more specific. He says, do you adhere to the 3 C's, and how do you go about talking to your admins about that? He later said that the 3 C's for him mean competition, culture/community, and careers. And I think you've already used some of those terms already. So I don't know if, and maybe you do know exactly what that is, and that was part of your strategy. But I would say that most people talk about the same things. They just don't have a way to label it, like the 3 C's.
Right.
But I think that's a really good point. And were those 3 C's? I mean, you talked about your pillars and careers. So I think the short answer would be yes, but I'm not sure. Have you used the term 3 C's before?
I have not used the term 3 C's, but it doesn't mean that that's not kind of just a different way of saying what we've been saying, right? Like, to me, that's just another way of looking at or categorizing that kind of multifaceted approach to our esports programs.
Yeah. I think it's interesting for us to also touch on like the reason our schools started programs, because I think that's going to be a topic that club presidents specifically who might be in chat might not realize or understand fully, because I don't when it comes to some schools. But we're both coming from schools who started it for the recruitment side, and now we're at schools who are doing other things with it or have goals beyond that. And I think it's important to realize that every school is going to be different in what they're doing. And there's the big divide right now is small schools are looking for it as a recruitment and enrollment, tuition dollars, etc. The bigger schools are going towards more of a student opportunity, student involvement side. So you look at Grand Valley, you look at Michigan, you look at Ohio State, you name the list of the big schools. And it's very much more focused on student involvement and engagement. And that brings with it a whole different set of goals for you as a coach and what you're supposed to be doing too. Have you spent much time on recruitment this year at the new school versus Muskingum?
I haven't done any recruitment at GVSU. It has been fully trying to get this set up. I was really brought in to kind of help shape and build what esports at Grand Valley is going to look like. And so, recruitment has not been a primary goal or focus of mine so far. It's really been, hey, what do we want this to look like? What do we need to support this the way we want it? And on top of that, let's start building events and opportunities for students. So that's, the big part of the Laker Esports Center opening up. And we've had different events on campus already for students. So those have kind of been the immediate focuses. Doesn't say recruiting's not, ever going to be a a focus or a goal, but it's just not one of the immediate goals. It's really been trying to figure out what this looks like first, and then recruitment second.
Yeah, and I think it's important to realize, like, when we talk about, I find it interesting coming from now. I guess I've been a college coach of some capacity. Watching the conversations of the college coaching thing in football right now is so fascinating to me, because all the media and all the news is about is like results and these like greatest brains of football. But when I see those, I'm like, that is only probably 30% of their job. If their job is anything like ours, it's like there is so much more that goes on. And I think I watched a documentary on Nick Saban previously, and it was really interesting because he and his wife actually like host every recruit they have at their house, and they talk about this whole process of recruiting. And that seemed to be much more of his role and his job than X's and O's. And I think that's really important for somebody looking at these going into college coaching for esports to realize is like, that's only part of our job. I don't know. How much time have you spent strategizing with teams this fall?
This fall, very little this fall, but outside of what I did at Muskingum before I came here. But yeah, I talking about the importance of recruiting, I think a lot of games are won and lost on the recruiting trail, right? If you're able to get those top tier recruits into your program, especially in collegiate esports right now, I would say, there are a lot of programs who are able to recruit highly talented individuals to their program to the point where it doesn't take a ton of coaching for them to be successful just based on the pure raw talent that they were able to recruit in to the space itself.
Yeah, 100%. That's, I think I always talk, I always mention that is like, no one's actually like, there's so little people or so little coaches that are actually developing talent at this point. We're just recruiting talent in. And I think the schools that can learn how to develop talent are the ones that come out of nowhere, and start, making a name for themselves. And that's really exciting. We've got a question here from Generic Typist. He's got a new job as an esports director at a private school. I think it's high school. Do you have any insight on how private high school esports differs from public high school esports? Good question. I did start a private or a esports program at a private high school. And I've served on the board of MICEF, the Michigan High School Esports Federation, in the past. So I kind of have an insight a little bit into that. But they're very similar, and they have unique struggles. And it usually comes down to where's the funding coming from, if they have funding. In the public schools, I think at least the directors that I've met are a lot more in tune and creative on identifying where money can come from. So a lot of the public high school directors that I've talked to have really good ways of identifying like STEM funds from grants that are just sitting around and waiting for something. Whereas when I was at the private high school, I just was terrible at that, but I had an easier time finding donors in the community to support the building of the lab. So, but for the most part, they're basically the same at a high school perspective. What do you got on the high school stuff?
I think you're probably the expert on that,
Okay.
With your
Right.
background. I defer to you on that one.
Noah the Nexus is in chat. He's coaching Overwatch at Rockford High School in Grand Rapids. He's my brother. He would know more too. He's putting a little bit into chat, it looks like. Mega says it definitely seems like recruitment should be a later step once the program is established. I think that's a good point for bigger schools specifically. I think from a smaller school's perspective, like the only KPI or key performance indicator you have as a coach when it comes to your department and your boss is recruitment. So it was not something we could wait to do. It was the only thing that they hired us to do. I don't know a better way to put it there. I don't know.
I agree with you 100%. Like, I very much, your priorities are in a lot of ways based on the intent of the program as a whole, right? If recruitment is the number one thing that's driving your program, if that's why they started an esports program, you have to put more time and attention to it. Whereas for me, recruitment isn't the driving factor at Grand Valley. I'm recruiting to become more competitive rather than I'm recruiting to show the value in the program as a whole.
Yeah, agreed. Madru puts in a chat, good reminder, friendly reminder to the college homies in the chat. Today is the CELO registration deadline. If you have not registered your CELO teams, you better do that. Good luck with that. Also interested in hearing from a pretty funk monk. Also interested in hearing thoughts on building a new program in a state where college esports is already pretty competitive. How do you be a disruptor? This is a good question for you. You're walking into Michigan that has 24 varsity programs already established. Where do you make your mark?
I think that there's a lot of opportunities. I had this interview with Michael later, and he's like, "Oh, what do you do to competitive edge?" Right? I told him that I look at other programs for inspiration, not comparison. If I'm focusing on Grand Valley State University and focusing on us being the best that we can be, I think that will be naturally attractive to a lot of students out there and a lot of potential talents for our teams. We have a lot to offer here. There's a reason, we're very conveniently located, right? Just 10, 15 minutes outside of the second largest city in Michigan, 23,000 students on campus. So if you have an interest in something, we've probably got it. And, there's a lot that we as a university have to offer. So my goal with our esports program is to make sure that we're also offering a quality experience through our esports program. And I think if you could tie those two together, quality educational opportunities with quality esports opportunities, it's just going to naturally attract students.
Man, you're too nice. What a political answer. What a great political answer, Chris. I have so much to learn from you. No, it's a good point. I mean, it's a good point. I like that. Like, don't compare, but get inspired by other programs. I think that's a great way to look at it. Because if you look at other programs as comparisons, you'll quickly get deflated because you start looking at different things like, all right, what about broadcasting? You instantly look at Boise State or St. Clair and you're like, oh, how am I ever going to get to that point? So I get that for sure. I see Bunny's in chat. What's up, Bunny? It's been a while. Mega says, dang, I feel like having recruitment as a KPI would kind of feel bad. I mean, it's just the reality. It's what we signed up for. It was what was in the interview process. But thankfully, bigger schools are getting on board, and they don't necessarily need to worry about recruitment at this point. I think at some point, recruitment will be another KPI for our varsity programs at bigger schools when competition becomes like the real thing that our bosses care about. Let's see. I'm trying to keep up with chat here. Adam is B tier compared to Chris. Thank you, Graham. Wow, what a deflating thing to read in my own brick chat.
Green here coming for him.
Oh my gosh. Still overshadowed by BSU. Hey, I said St. Clair. I mean, it's difficult to not mention Boise and St. Clair when you talk about broadcast at this point. But I thought that was when people used to ask me like a year and a half ago, going into my second year at Aquinas, was like, how do you make your mark or establish yourself? I think broadcast was one of those big potentials. Like, it's still out there. There's so much room to kind of make a name for yourself in broadcast because there's only a couple that are really doing it well. So another trick I used for public high schools, we've got a little conversation going on about the high school scene, which is awesome. You said St. Clair second. We want to be number one. Hey, Sean, one day, I believe. Adam, please convince Chris to add me into the jersey orders. There you go. Bunny is requesting a jersey order. What's the most frustrating part being a coach?
Ooh.
I'll let you answer this one first, I think.
Frustrating. So one thing that I had to learn, and I don't know if frustrating is the right term, but I had to learn that you can't do everything. When I first started out, I was trying to just do everything and be the best. And we as coaches and directors, we wear so many different hats in our position that it can be overwhelming at times, right? So trying to prioritize and figure out what's important, what needs to be done, what can be put off till later, and understanding. And I think this is really important. Understanding that there are going to be some times where either things slip through the cracks a little bit, or they're not done as maybe as well as you had hoped. I'm kind of a perfectionist on a lot of different things, but giving yourself a little bit of a break sometime, I think is really important. And if you don't, you're going to drive yourself crazy with everything you have going on.
That's a good point. I think for me, I think there's two things that really get me. I think the first one is you don't have control over everything. And most of the frustration comes from our bosses or the administration of a school, who can put rules in place that we have to follow. That goes for any job out there. I'm not saying like this isn't the only one, but there are frustrations because sometimes we just want to go and we can't. There's also things that we're not privy to that happen behind the scenes that we just get told we can't do something and we just can't. So that's frustrating, I think. And there's frustration because sometimes the people making those decisions don't understand what esports is or what we're trying to ask for. And sometimes that falls on us. Sometimes that's just a decision made before we get a chance. I think. Yeah.
No, I was gonna say, yeah, I definitely feel that with me transitioning from Muskingum to Grand Valley. I am the type of person that when I hit the ground, my wheels are already spinning, right? Like I am very much a doer, like gonna come through and make things happen. And Grand Valley has really forced me to slow down a little bit, right? Not because I don't want to do more things, just because the nature of the institution as itself has forced me to slow a bit in the progress and the path and the speed in which I want to do things. So that has been frustrating. But like you said, I think that's just part of being in larger institution as a whole. I think specifically, like I said, about being an esports coach, just understanding that you do have a lot of different hats and that sometimes you have to balance those hats.
Yeah, for sure. And the other, I think, frustration that I experience as a coach is the difference in expectations from our students, and then the differences in expectations from ourselves, and then from our bosses. And they're never in alignment of what like our students expect from us in our program, what we expect out of our students and our administration, and then what our administration expects out of us. And that can be really frustrating because we're trying to juggle all of these expectations and trying to set priorities. And we want to do best for our students, but sometimes our students, their priorities are different than our administration's, and the resources don't line up. I think that's an overall frustration that causes me quite a bit of stress, I would say. And when I talk to a club president and they're like, I just don't understand why a school isn't supporting us or whatever, it's difficult to articulate that the expectations and what the goals out of esports, they're just different. And sometimes the admins just have to catch up a little bit.
And I think for a lot of institutions, like there is a lack of understanding about what esports is and could be, unlike anything, specifically from a competitive standpoint, that they've ever seen before, right? When was the last time that something like esports has come around on college campuses, right?
Yeah.
So that hesitation or the slow movement where you see a lot of these clubs get frustrated, and I know the students at GV were frustrated because they've been pushing for this for years
for
now,
a long time,
right? And it's just, you have to understand that institutions, if it's something that they're unfamiliar with, they're going to do their research on it, or they should do their research on it and try to figure out how they're going to do it right. And so, me being hired at Grand Valley was really the first step in this. It was Grand Valley said, hey, we know that there's this esports thing that we've had a lot of student interest is. We want to do this. We just aren't sure exactly how we should be doing it.
Yeah.
And so bringing me in to kind of lay down a foundation and lay out a plan for what this looks like in the future is really the first step. And for student clubs and organizations on campus, just keep pushing. Like if you don't have that type of support yet, keep trying, keep pushing, keep I I want to say make it so they can't ignore you, right? Like if you are out there on campus doing things constantly, showing student interest and showing student support to it, eventually things will happen. I guarantee it. Things will happen. You just got to keep going.
Yeah, I think it's important to realize that the industry and the popularity of the term esports has progressed so rapidly that if you keep continuing to do things at the club level, like the school is talking about it. Someone at the school is talking about esports at this point because you can't not. You're talking about Ohio State has an esports director. Arizona hired one. Oregon, Maryland, Michigan now has somebody. So like you're talking about these massive state schools are hiring people to be esports directors. Most other institutions are at least talking about it. And that wasn't the case when we talked 3-4 years ago when people were like, hey, club presidents, like keep trying, pushing. Now the industry's kind of catching up to help you out a little bit. I think Doctor brings up a good point in chat. I feel like I'm constantly stuck in a proof of concept phase for esports. I know what can be done, but need to keep showing that it works. I think that's really I think that's a fair like point. I feel that as well as like if I have one victory or one win, I have to prove myself again the next time I ask for something. But I'm assuming my guess is the same thing happened when like college sports first started. It's like it wasn't the entire idea of esports is still a proof of concept, especially to admins and 50 or people who are like 45 plus. It's like they still don't totally understand it. And I think that'll continue to be a thing, but hopefully each of those battles and each of those proofs of concept you kind of prove will hopefully be one less battle for the future.
And I'll say that, like, as words of encouragement, just if you keep grinding, you can get out of that proof of concept phase. When I left Muskingum, it had gotten to the point where, we had proven the value of the program and esports was not going anywhere, right? It was looked at as rather this kind of questionable thing. It became an asset to Muskingum University that they had such a flourishing and growing esports program, right? So just keep going, keep grinding. I know, yes, it can be frustrating that you feel like you have to prove yourself, and people already kind of come in with, college campuses. Some people might be for it, some people might be against it. You kind of have to feel like you prove the haters wrong or prove the doubters wrong. But over time, I'm supremely confident that people will see the value of esports, and I think that after having a program on campus for a while, things will naturally start to shift. I highly encourage you, if you have or if you're running your own esports program, to get your students involved outside of the doors of your lab. So for like me at Muskingum University, our students went as a team to other sports teams' games, right? Or we were doing pretty much anytime there was something going on campus that different groups were signing up for, we had a Muskingum Esports group that was also signed up for that, whether it was the Minute to Win It challenges or Relay for Life or whatever it might be, right? We were doing that as well. So I highly encourage you to get your teams active and involved outside of the lab itself. And I think that will start showing a lot of those people who maybe had been doubters in the past that not only is esports here and an important part of your campus or an important part of your community, but there's, it's just another way that we're one of us, that everybody is, kind of together in this.
Absolutely. Cabot, thanks for stopping by. Cabot's one of our Rocket League players at Florida Southern. He's got to go get ready for his concert tonight. Break a leg. But back to what you were saying, I think that's a really good point and something I need to work on. I think one of the similar to that, I think what was interesting is when I would have professors email me saying like, hey, I met so-and-so in my class today. He's a great student. He's one of your players. Those types of interactions change minds on esports. Because right now, a faculty member or a staff member can sit in a meeting behind a closed door and complain about esports and the idea of gaming. But once they realize the types of students that we have in our programs, things shift. They shift completely when they realize that our GPA for a program is 3.11. That's what it was at Aquinas last spring. Like, conversation shift, and it's not we don't want those gamers on campus. It's, whoa, these guys are awesome. Like, these are great students who are leading not only in the esports program, but also in other places. They might be presidents of other student clubs. Here's a good question. I'll let you answer first. By Hand Soap, what's the most rewarding part about being a coach?
Ooh, for me, I've always said I love being around students because it's energizing to me, and that when people are passionate about certain things and they're getting to indulge in their things that they're passionate about, it's just I can't get enough of it, right? So seeing students have a place or have a team that allows them to explore things that they're interested in or excited about, or things that they're really good at, right? I think for me as a coach, especially in these first few years where we're now providing opportunities that students have never had before, that's some of the most rewarding parts to me.
I would say mine's similar to that. But mine also includes when they realize that passion and they convert it into some career opportunity, whether that's part-time, volunteer, or a full-time job. Is like, those are the moments when, like, Powder from Aquinas, I always use him as my reference, but Powder at Aquinas, who's casting, gets his first paid opportunity as a caster. Like, that was like one of my top 3 moments as a coach so far, because it was him realizing, taking a passion he has of Rocket League and converting it into something that he could do post-graduation. And I think that's really cool. Same would go for seeing a player go start coaching at a high school in the area and then coming to me and saying, I want to be a coach for the rest of my life. Like, that's my thing. Like, those are the moments where, like, you're like thrown off and you're like, okay, this is really awesome. I think a lot of coaches in the space would probably say, like, the moment they walk across the stage and get their diploma. I think that's a cool moment as well. I've had a couple of those students, but only being at Aquinas for 2 years, I only had, like, walk-ons do that.
I'll add one more into this. I think that for me, one of my favorite parts of esports is the connections it can help create. A lot of times gaming has been seen, and it can be kind of an isolating thing, right? You go back to your room, you play your games, you're kind of by yourself. You're not sitting side by side or connecting with students necessarily in the same way that a lot of other traditional sports connect students, right? So for me, like, at Muskingum, my teams became so closely knit that they got to the point that, like, on game days, they would all make dinner together and have dinner in the arena, whether it was a spaghetti dinner or breakfast for dinner or whatever that might be, right? I love that. I couldn't get enough of that, because they're forging connections and they're forging relationships through esports that they're going to carry with them for the rest of their life.
That's so cool. That's the reason I started. I mean, that specific reason was why I started the high school team at West Catholic. Was I was gaming with my buddies from high school, and I wanted to create that same opportunity at the high school level. And yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. It's like when you see friendships that were formed because of the program you started or you helped grow, like, those are awesome experiences. That was awesome. Real Madrew says, to me, it's celebrating the student successes with them, no matter what they are. That's cool. When a student brings the success of theirs that involves something non-esports related, I think that's always a fun conversation to have. Mega says team dinners are really OP. Tech Zen Esports breaks down the barriers of traditional sports by being accessible in many different mediums and environments. That's why I love it. And Mega does team dinners at least once a month with my team. That's cool. I at Aquinas, I'd like cater in food once in a while. Something I should probably get back into, but I'm at a place where, like, I still don't know my budget. I'm just kind of using my boss's credit card until he yells at me. Which is another totally different experience when we talk about starting a new program, is like going from the small school where I was at to a D2 that has different priorities. Like money is treated differently. Recruitment's treated differently. Scholarships are treated differently. Like it's totally, like so many things are totally vastly different. Yeah. Hell of a budget. Team dinners once a month. I mean, sometimes team dinner was pizza from down the street. Like it wasn't. Yeah. Choose in chat from St. Louis University. My bosses only yell at me once. That's good. My bosses only yell at me once too, and it was because the arena looked like a mess, and I deserved it. So, yeah. Can you as coaches speak to the impact of the pandemic has on esports, good and bad? What was your experience with the pandemic and collegiate esports?
So in a lot of ways, I said that esports was kind of COVID resistant, and that at Muskingum, while all of the other teams were shut down because of the pandemic, we were still able to compete. So in a way, it was kind of an opportunity for us to get ourselves out there and make a name for ourselves, because we were really the only game in town. We were the only team out there competing, having results, having opportunities for students to watch other students compete. So, I don't think, for me, the biggest impact the pandemic has had is one on LAN opportunities, which huge, supporter of getting your students out to as many LAN opportunities as you can. We were able to take a few last year, and students said it was the favorite thing they've done since they stepped on campus. So as much as you can get students out to LAN, highly recommend it. Pandemic definitely limited those opportunities. But outside of that, I mean, I don't think it changed too much. It was plexiglass and masks and sanitizing stations, but we were still able to do a lot of the things that we wanted to do.
So we had a different experience. We kind of pushed everything remote, even practices, except students who were living on campus, which wasn't as big of a number as probably your school was. So we kind of missed out on a lot of the team building and a lot of the coaching opportunity, in my opinion, when we went fully remote. And I think it hurt a lot of things. Like, yes, we were still competing, but it just didn't feel the same. And I'm still, like, as a coach, trying to kick myself back out of that mindset of, oh, we can do it remote, or remote's totally fine. When in reality, it's totally different. So coming from a program that didn't have the same experience as you did during the pandemic, like, we missed out. And my players missed out. I think the team development missed out.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, there's so much value to me in having in-person practices and in-person coaching. And while I had students that, didn't live on campus, I always made everything, it had to be in person, mandatory in person, for those exact reasons, right? The value that's in having them there.
Yeah, I agree. Generic typist, when I was with SUNY Oneonta, I butchered that name, esports club, the Discord, and our teams basically tripled in size. Plus, the SUNY system hosted a tournament for all SUNY schools, which kickstarted our team participation in tournaments. That all happened mid-pandemic. Wow, that's pretty impressive. That's awesome. You actually pronounced it perfectly. Wow. All right. I think you pronounced... All right, I'm not even going to try it again. We're just going to... Adam's got it. He's very cultured. We'll just keep it there.
Florida man.
Florida man. Taken done. Wrap it up. There it is. Man. So what are the things, like, do you think that there's always panels on, there's a lot of places that put panels on there, like, for new programs, like generic, like how often to run practices, what leagues can be in, etc. What things did you have to learn on your own that we might have not talked about yet that you think are valuable?
Man, I do things, as I do some things sometimes a little bit differently than a lot of people, but I think it's important, once again, to live kind of within your means when it comes to your esports program. Understand what's sustainable within your team, how much you can handle, and work within those parameters, right? If you can't run 7 teams, don't try to run 7 teams. If you can only do 4, that's okay. If your teams can only handle 1 league, or if you think that it's best for them to have 1 league, you don't have to sign them up for 7, 3, however many leagues. Just stick with that 1. And I think that's really important to understand is that I get the want and desire to do as much as possible, right? As long as that doesn't diminish the quality of what you're doing. So if you're able to keep that quality and keep that high level program for it, by all means do more. Just don't stretch yourself too thin.
I think that's a fair assessment. I think where I fall in the trap is my fear of if I don't sign up for multiple tournaments, no one will know who Florida Southern is. No one will have heard Florida Southern Esports. And that's kind of where I was with Aquinas the first 2 years. It's like, how can we not be in NACE and the Developer League and one other league? Because we have to be. Like, we just have to be. Everyone will see our name. Which I think I think there's probably an argument there as well. But I think the stronger argument after coaching for 3 years now, or 2.5 years, whatever, is probably towards what you said. And I think it also depends on who's on your roster, how competitive you are, and like what are the goals of the program and the goals of your students walking into it.
So, and that's where I would say, like, I mean, for you're like, oh, I got to get my name out there, right? But for me, I'm like, I am so focused on creating the best experience possible for our students, our current students, that, if it means that I'm only in one league to create the best possible experience for them, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I noticed last year we did a lot of different leagues, and I didn't feel like that gave us enough time to focus on improvement. We were so busy playing games and focusing on matches and this and that we didn't take time to study what we were doing and kind of take a step back and focus on fundamentals and different things that we would have wanted to do. So I changed things up quite a bit at Muskegon this year, and I think for the best, but yeah, I understand the desire of our teams. Oh, I'm trying to get Aquinas College or Florida Southern out there into the college esports verse, right? Where everybody can see it.
But I mean, that helped with recruitment. So like going back to like the only kind of goal that was set on me from the institution was get your 15 new students every year. It was a lot easier if people had heard of Aquinas Esports.
Right.
But the way you recruited and the students you went after weren't necessarily looking for all that competition. They were looking for that experience and the improvement in competition, etc. So I think it speaks to how the type of student we recruited and how each could be successful. But I would say that, like, if I was going to do Aquinas over again, I probably wouldn't be in as many leagues as I was. I think we were doing like 3 or 4 leagues each semester. And I felt burnt out come mid-October, and I wasn't even playing. So I think we had 99 matches last fall semester across our games.
We did 212 at Muskingum.
In one semester?
Oh, in the semester? No, over the year.
Okay. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, we're kind of in the same boat there.
Right?
It's crazy. That's so many. And this semester, we have 3 teams or 3 games, and we were in 45 matches, and it felt so manageable. I mean, it was still like a match a week for each game, and it felt like a full schedule. But it was half of what I did at Aquinas. Yeah. So Noah's saying Aquinas Overwatch played in 4 leagues this fall. It's so many. But like that's the norm. I don't know.
And everybody runs their program differently, right? But for me, I like the idea of having one main league that as many of my teams as possible can compete in. And then, there's the developer leagues as well, right? So, the C-Laws of the world that you could compete in potentially alongside that main league.
Correct. Yeah, and I think that's good. A lot of times in the past when I'm deciding leagues, the only determining factor is what night of the week they compete on. Like I would have my player schedules and I'd be like, okay, for Overwatch, Monday and Thursdays are free. The rest, they have classes. So we're going to do any league that's on Monday or Thursday. And that's the only factor we had in determining our decision. So, yeah, it's just so many matches.
And it's also like, ultimately, I always go back to, you talked about success is graduation, right? Like they're there to be college students, right? And
Yeah.
I think at some point when you're putting too much on students, you start to take away from that academic focus that really should be there as well.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. How do you handle academics? Let's talk about academics because that's never a topic on panels for some odd reason. How do you help your students be successful in academics?
So I was blessed that at Muskingum we actually had a lot of tools that gave me information on how my students were doing. Like when my students would miss classes, when they would get a poor quiz grade, I was given that information, which I then could talk about with my students. And what was great about that is that I was kind of able to build a rapport with my students that when I would bring these type of things up, it wasn't because I wanted to punish you, right? If you're missing 2 or 3 classes in a row, what's going on? Let's talk about it so that we can try to make things better moving forward, right? Also, I'm a big fan of some type of study table for your team. I think not only is it, allow time academically and put an emphasis on academics, but it also builds that connection and camaraderie, right? When you're all at study tables together, it's a time for your team to bond. So I'm a big, big academic person. My GPA requirement at Muskingum was much higher than what the athletic departments as a whole was, and that was just because I told them, I said you're here to be students first, and it's really important to keep that in mind when you're building your program.
I agree. We had study tables at Aquinas, and although my students hated them, I do believe it was a really integral piece in their academic success, especially freshmen and transfers who definitely were required to go to those. Now I get midterm grades. Now I get a 3-week grade check, and then I'll get finals. I have not implemented any study tables yet, but at this school, it's not something that's already set up by the athletic department. Like, it's on me. Whereas Aquinas, it was the athletic department had study tables for us already. Hand Soap says, I just want to say that you both speak clearly, and it's clear that you care a great deal about how you choose your words to make it clear. Thank you for being good at talking and making that available to us. Hey, no problem, Hand Soap. Appreciate you stopping by. No study tables at Florida Southern. There are not study tables at Florida Southern. There is like specific nights of the week the school has like tutors and study sessions available, but they're not required, and they're available to all students on campus. So when I had midterm talks with my students who had struggling grades, those were a part of some of those action plans of how to get students back on track. But they were not like mandated by the athletic department. Yeah. Anything else on academics you want to touch on?
No, I encourage GPA requirements. Study tables are great, not only for improving academics, but also bonding students. And if you have tools that your university gives you, I encourage you to use them.
Yes. Yeah. And I think academics was the greatest source of my stress the first year coaching, because we had a minimum GPA requirement, and I had students who just became ineligible their second semester. And that was such a pain and a stress inducer, and it hurt the entire program and each team that didn't have a player that semester. Really, if you're a new coach, like really try to focus on academics, like set up some type of fail safe or any fail safe you can to help ensure students succeed in the classroom, especially your freshmen, especially your transfers.
Similar but different. I also encourage some type of fitness program in your university as a whole, right? Getting your students together to get active at least once a week, highly recommended. And a lot of people hear that, they're like, oh, I'm not going to be able to get my team out there to do powerlifting, right? It doesn't have to be powerlifting. I really mean at its base, getting your team out there and getting them active together. Like we would go play pickup basketball. You could do a variety of different things. Some students wanted to lift, so I let them go lift because that was what they were interested in, right? But having accessible, active options for your students and requiring them to do it at least once a week is something that I highly recommend for all programs.
It's a good point. I don't know if I've ever met a coach that would disagree with that, but I've met plenty of coaches, including myself, who thinks their plate is so full that adding a fitness thing might be the camel or the straw to break the camel's back. I'm still at that point where like I want to incorporate fitness, but I have to get ready for the match that's on Tuesday and then Thursday and then Saturday. Like, where do I fit in this? Where do I fit it in? And also the other thing is like, look at me. I don't look like I've been in a gym because I rarely have been in one. Like, I don't feel comfortable in a gym. And at Aquinas, we didn't have personal trainers, so they wouldn't be able to like help with any of that. So I think there's a lot of excuses that we could come up with. I do come up with them where like, yes, I think it would be cool and important, but so busy.
And I think it comes down to, we talked about setting your priorities, right?
Yeah.
To me,
Yeah.
there's been so many studies that are done about healthy body, healthy mind, and how getting physically active improves performance, that it is a priority for me that I'm willing to miss one practice a week, or have my students potentially miss a practice a week to have them get out and get active, right? And I know you're saying, like, people are extremely busy. I get that. I 100% do, right?
Yeah. Do I sound like one of your students?
No. It was funny. Like, by the time I left, our weekly fitness day was something that people looked forward to.
Wow.
My students really enjoyed doing that. In the beginning, there were some people that, was a little intimidating for, that were nervous about it. But when you're building up that culture over time, yeah, it was, I'm hanging out with my friends, doing something active together. We're shooting hoops, whatever it might be. You just have to take the time to actually build that culture. And like I said, you have to make it a priority for your program.
Speaking of culture, where was I going with this? Oh, all right. So you're talking about all sunshines and rainbows. They're all friends. Kumbaya. Is that the reality of coaching an esports program? All your players get along and they love each other?
No,
Okay.
but I think that's the reality of just people, right? Is that not everybody gets along and enjoys each other.
How did you learn how to combat or work around issues that relate to personnel stuff among your teams? And what advice would you give to a new coach?
I think it's important at first is to listen. A lot of times people don't feel like they're being heard. So when you have conversations, pull people out of the situation to have a personal conversation with them. When I had to do anything that was like, on a like kind of a disciplinary side with it, right? I would literally take them out of the arena and walk around campus and talk to them, right? Like take them out of that situation, change their set of mind. And my big thing when I'm having those conversations is helping the student to understand why I'm telling them the things that I'm telling, right? When they rage quit a game or stop doing something or, whatever that behavior might be, I think it's important to give them the why. So first time everything's come up, right? Like I had, let me give you an example. I had a student who, instead of doing whatever the team was doing, decided he was going to go play and do his own matches or whatever, right? The team was having a match and everybody was watching, but they were doing their own thing. So I took him aside and I said, hey, here's the thing, right? Perception is very important when it comes, I use the phrase perception is reality, right? So I was explaining to them that regardless of what your intentions may have been, this is what the team saw.
Yeah.
Right. And this is a lesson that you're going to carry with you, hopefully for the rest of your life, is the understanding you can have the best intentions, but what other people perceive is ultimately what's real to them. And so, I think getting to the why is really important when you're having these conversations, taking them out of the situation. And then if, you have these situations, you're trying to teach something, letting them know, like, I'm not here to punish you. Like, I'm not here to necessarily yell at you or scream at you. That's nothing you'll hear Coach Bilski ever yell or scream at you. I don't think that's ever happened yet. But I'm here to teach you, and I'm here to make you understand that why your behavior was incorrect and what we can do in the future to correct it.
Yeah, that's fair. I haven't yelled at it either, but my face has gotten red and I've kicked someone off the team before. So, but that's for a different story, I think. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I think my first year as a program director, I think I would tell, I don't know if I told you this, but like I told other assistant coaches in the program, is like 90% of my job was having tough conversations. Like I had assistant coaches who were running practices, but as soon as there was a personnel issue or a kid had a problem with somebody, like that's where I had to step in. And that's where most of my job was kind of conflict management. We had powwows. We had team powwows with the Rocket League team. We had team powwows with the League of Legends team. Like you and Carl had powwows with some players. It's a pretty common occurrence, especially when you're so hyper focused on one specific team too. I think it's easy for us as directors who are overseeing multiple teams to not notice the small conflicts and to just either ignore them or just not see them. But when you're so hyper focused on a small team, or you're always in the lab, you can see those and those conversations happen or have to happen. So
I'm a firm believer in the idea of mistakes or opportunities for growth.
Yeah.
And when I look at like disciplinary issues or things that come up, I look at those as opportunities to help you develop as a person, right? We said that one of our big growths here was, helping people to develop. And I think that some of the best development happens in the wake of mistakes.
Yeah.
And so having the opportunity to work with those students is a huge opportunity for growth for them.
Yeah. And Mega, who's the club president, says half of my work as club president is conflict resolution. It doesn't change if you go into full-time coaching. But when you're a full-time coach, now it's, if you don't resolute the conflict correctly, your boss finds out and you get to be talked to. So it doesn't change. The conflict resolution continues as a full-time coach or director. And you just kind of get used to it too. Like thinking about your first conversation, like, yes, it was stressful and maybe there was some anxiety there, but once you get past month 2 and you've had 6 conversations with different players about them being butt munches, you get used to it. But it's also important to realize that every student's different in how they react to different situations, how they react to your advice and what you're talking to or speaking to. And catering that message in different ways, I think, is really important too. Like there are students who respond very well to me dropping an F-bomb and telling them like, dude, you messed up, versus there are students who, if I even raise my voice or use a strong term once, like they will be crying and inconsolable. So there are different students and different ways to coach those students and teach those lessons. And I think that's an important piece of coaching as well. So, and that goes for not only like conflict resolution and tough conversations, but it also goes for like coaching in game too. I mean, you have students who listen to a captain who's yelling at them, versus there are students who completely shut down if someone tells them they're doing something wrong. And that's just something you have to kind of balance out. Mango says, I'm glad the gaming club and the varsity program is different here at Lords. As president, I mainly just focus on events since Lords is so small. True. Nice. Lamar can handle the conflict. That's fun. What other things? What else do we need to talk about? Does anybody have any questions about starting a new program that we haven't talked about that you guys are interested in knowing?
Yeah, it's like I feel like, there's always these esports panels that'll talk about, the basic thing. Oh, what you should have in your arena and how to secure funding and like all of these type of things. I feel like there's a lot of actually information about that. So if people have questions that maybe fall outside of, the typical starting my program box,
Yeah,
we might be able to answer those.
yeah. You're not getting a conflict resolution panel yet at any esports events. No one's talking about conflict resolution or academic strategies, even though that is most of our jobs, most likely, or navigating the political landscape of higher education. That is not a topic, but that is most of our headaches. I see Chris rolling his eyes. um, but yeah, those are what that's what I struggle with, is like the political landscape, and yeah, I don't know. Cool. I don't have any other questions. What else you want to talk about?
Ooh, man, did we have anything spicy on Twitter this week to talk about?
No, we don't. But
Oh,
Mango
man.
has a question here. What are some red flags you should notice when looking to take on the task of building a program from scratch? Ooh, I got lots of red flags. Oh man. You want to start with this one, and I'll fill in the holes.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll start with a red flag about a program who approached me to take over.
Okay.
Was that the way they viewed esports and esports athletes was not comparable to other student athletes on campus. It was like they were kind of like second class athletes, if that makes sense, right? Um, that to me was a huge red flag, because the way I looked at my students, especially at Muskingum, right? We were doing same amount of practices, same amount of matches. We were investing as much time into our craft. We worked out, right? As any of the other traditional sports teams on campus. And so, I was always fighting for my students to get that. I mean, I wasn't always fighting, because I think after a while it was, campus really embraced it. But, that was one of my goals, to try to put us out there on the same level as every other sports team on campus.
That's fair. Going through the interview process at a couple different institutions, actually, we both have gone through a couple different interview processes, and we've both declined offers from other institutions. So we've seen some red flags. I think for me, it was, I needed to see the budget that they were proposing. I needed to see the scholarships that they were looking to offer, and what that would mean for how much cost would be. And when I saw that things were the same of where I was no longer interested. So I think some red flags might be, another way to identify a potential red flag for me is to ask what their goals are 3 to 5 years from now. A lot of schools who are starting esports have goals for the first 2 years. They want 15 new students year 1 and 15 more new students year 2. And that's usually where the goals end. And I think asking the interviewer and the hiring manager questions about what their goals are past year 2, I think can be really telling to what they how they actually view esports. If they don't have an answer or don't have a vision they kind of have in their head, it probably means they just want students, and the only goal is to recruit new students. And being at Aquinas, like, that was very apparent in the interview process, although I wasn't keen to it at that point. And then it just stayed the same as a concern of mine all the way up until I left. And it was a big reason why I left. And I think that was a red flag for me.
I think the budget one that you talked about is a really important one.
Yeah.
For me, the way I look at it is like, I have this vision of what I want my program to be, and is there going to be the type of budgetary support that I need to make that a reality?
Yeah.
And it's like things like travel and stuff like that, right? Anywhere I go and I want to build a program, I want to take my students to have face-to-face competitive opportunities, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if the university is not thinking that, or the college is not thinking that, right, then it's not going to be the right fit for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're going through this process, is trying to think about what you are looking for and what's going to fit you well. I also think a big thing for a lot of these schools, and I can give Grand Valley credit in this, is that, are they willing to listen? Right? Like, when you're talking to colleges and universities and you're, providing advice or talking about, what best practices might be within the industry, are they willing to take that advice? Are they willing to listen to you and give you that type of trust? That's a big red flag. If they have their own kind of, this is what we want, this is how it needs to be, we just need you to run that plan that we already have. Yeah. That's just not going to be the best fit for me as a person.
Yeah. And you brought up budget. I think tying budget to the goals that they have set for you, if you were to take that job, is really important. Is like, all right, they want you to bring in X amount of students. They're willing to offer this much in scholarship or this much for budget. Do you realistically think you can achieve those goals with those resources? Because I'll tell you right now, like once you get hired and you accept that job, that budget that they have written down most likely isn't going to increase. If anything, it might go down, because they're trying to sell their vision to the talent that they're recruiting as well. So I have yet to be in a place where I get hired and they're like, well, we told you it'd be $30,000 a year budget. We're actually going to give you 40. That's not how this works. Unless if you have a sale and you convince them to do so.
Whoops.
It's difficult to see it's difficult for me to point to some like major red flags in job descriptions. And I think people might be trying to allude to like a job description. Like, is there a salary that would give you a red flag? Is there a blank in the job description that would give you a red flag? And my answer would be not necessarily. Some of those job descriptions are written by HR departments where the hiring manager had no idea of it. Some of those jobs, different people might be interested in that job. I mean, when we talk about like part-time, like even if it's part-time, it might be a red flag for me, but it might not be a red flag for somebody else. Like they might want to just do it part-time. They might want to only be paid X amount. The classic one is like, oh, when they spell esports wrong or they put esports head coach as the job. I think I would put that as a yellow flag. I don't think it's a red flag, like a stop sign. I think some of those things you can educate during the interview process and then once you're hired. But knowing the true thought process and how how your future boss kind of goes about those questions and those conversations, I think is more important, like you alluded to.
Yeah, and I think that, like, once again, it's about buy-in and willingness to listen. Yeah, they might spell esports incorrectly, but if they're willing to listen to you and they're convinced that this is a good idea for their university, like, who cares if they spelled it with a little e, right? Like, to me, I know I had a conversation with somebody once who was like, yeah, we talked to the first person who talked to us about this pointed out how bad we looked because we put the little e on the esports. And, that was really a bit, I'm like, hey, you were reaching out to people for help. Like, as long as you're willing to listen and help, I can teach you about these certain things, about how kind of the gaming culture and esports culture and, how things are done and the right way to spell esports. Even if you get it wrong the first time, we can still make it right.
Yeah.
Even if you put a little e in your facility, there's always the chance to make that the big E the second time around, right? There's opportunity here.
Yeah. There's a nice email I sent to the head of marketing at Aquinas, like my first month there. It's like, hey, everybody, the Associated Press has agreed on how to use the proper spelling. Here it is. But that didn't need to be happening prior to the interview process or prior to me hiring. But I kind of want to go back to the fact that what might be a red flag for me and where I'm at with my career and my goals and ambitions might not be a red flag for everybody else. I think, Chris, when you were looking at, when some of these opportunities kind of fell in your lap, you were looking for different things than I was. I went through the interview process at a couple different institutions. And for me, like red tape and college politics was a big red flag for me, and a reason why I pulled out of the Arizona interview process and took the Florida Southern job. Seeing a similar salary and a similar budget as Aquinas at another institution is the reason I pulled my name from that job offer, because I didn't want to go start a new program with the same amount of resources at a similar size school. Like, why would I want to redo that situation again? So for me, those might be red flags, but for other people, those might be perfectly fine. And I think that's important to realize and to note, and don't let people to discourage you from applying or interviewing or taking a job because a red flag for them something is a red flag for them, but not for you.
And I think what you said about the HR writing a lot of these listings is a really important point.
Yeah.
Because I think that happens a lot where they're like, hey, we're not sure what we're doing. So we honestly are just kind of copy pasting from some other esports job listing that we saw at some other institution. So just because maybe the posting doesn't look the best, don't let that discourage you from applying for the position if it's something that you're interested in.
Correct.
And then just make sure that once you actually, if you do, hopefully get into that interview process, you're ready and prepared with good questions about things that are important to you.
Yes.
Because I don't think, it's like that whole you can't judge a book by its cover idea, right? You can't judge a job by the job description necessarily.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to actually kind of go through that if it's something that interests you and get more information so you can make an educated decision on it.
Yeah, completely agree. Cool. Any other questions related to that? Anybody in chat? You got questions? I think it was an interesting exercise I don't know if exercise, but going through the process of interviewing at a couple different institutions. I think it opened up my eyes to what was out there, and what was the possibilities. Like, maybe I'm still crazy for taking Florida Southern over Arizona, but for me, like seeing the conversations and knowing what I could potentially land instead of like just jumping ship at the first job offer I got, it opened up my eyes to where we're going as a industry. Collegiate esports, I mean, it's growing and expanding so rapidly. It's insane. It's crazy. And that exercise was really exciting.
I think there are so many opportunities that are, there are already a lot of opportunities out there, but there's going to be even more here in the near future. I truly believe that, in the next 5 years, that pretty much every collegiate institution in the country is going to have some type of esports program associated with it. And we have a lot now, but I mean, we're not even close to 75%, 100%. We're nowhere near there, right? So lots of opportunities on the horizon, I think, in esports. And going for me, I wasn't even, this, like I wasn't applying to places really like that.
Yeah.
That wasn't, I was in a place that I was very happy, which allowed me to even more so through the process, make sure that wherever I was going to go had everything that I was looking for.
Yeah. And I wouldn't encourage people to just apply for jobs willy-nilly or like right when you get a new job, start applying for others. But after the 2-year mark, when I wasn't feeling the growth or the support that I thought our program deserved, I think that felt like a good time to start looking at the possibility. It wasn't me saying like, oh, I'm going to quit in 2 months. Let me start applying for jobs. It was, let's get a tone of what's happening in the industry. And maybe I find something that just feels right. And I would encourage people to do that if you're feeling stuck after 2 years and you're just not feeling the support, because there's going to be institutions that don't want to grow esports with you. They don't want to grow esports. Like, that's not their goal. And that was a key learning that I had. Or it would be very difficult to convince them to grow esports. Not that they're totally against it. Mango kind of alluded, or you kind of alluded to this, but Mango's asking, where do you guys see collegiate esports in 3 to 5 years? Or do you want to add anything to that?
I truly believe that esports is still in this early to middle-ish stage of growth at the collegiate level. Like I believe every college in the country is going to have an esports program one way or another. I mean, you can even look further out. I think that there may be NCAA involvement eventually in esports, because I just feel like there's too much money for them to try to stay away. So maybe we see the NCAA partnering with different developers to bring certain leagues under the esports umbrella. Maybe they partner with Riot Games to officially establish the NCAA championship for League of Legends or whatever that might be, right? But I only see it continuing to grow, right? I don't see this momentum that we have stopping. And the reason I truly believe that that's, not the case, that this is only going to continue to explode, is because I'm looking at what's happening in middle schools and high schools across the country as an indicator of what's going to happen in colleges over the next 5 to 10 years. And if you walk into any high school, any middle school today, and you say, who likes video games? Who's interested in gaming, right? Like, there's going to be every hand at that school assembly that has, in one way or another, being touched by gaming or gaming culture. And so as that kind of wave of momentum just continues to grow and generate, it'll wash over collegiate and continue to help solidify its place at colleges across the country.
Garvey has a great quote, and I think he got it from somebody else, but he used it in his Garvey from Twitch student. He says, like, if you want to know what the future looks like, look at what students are dreaming about today. And I think that speaks volumes to esports because, like you said, I mean, the high school and middle school scene, like, gaming is so integrated in what they're doing, what they consume, that there's only, like, it can't go away at this point. Like, yes, it will change and form, but there's just such a great opportunity for growth. And when you see both big and small institutions adopting esports, like, no one, like, very little people are like saying no or taking it away. And that should be a huge indicator when higher education institutions are adopting something pretty rapidly, versus what they've historically done. Like, there's pretty good chance that it'll continue to grow, in my opinion.
To your point, right? Like, schools that have started esports teams are holding on to those esports teams and those esports institutions, right? Unless the university itself is basically going under, like, esports programs are only continuing to grow in the first few years that they've had them.
True. And last question, Mega Blaze is asking, will Florida Southern smash Peach Belt CLOL this season? Maybe, but Converse joined the Peach Belt this year, and they will be a very competitive and tough opponent. But I'm optimistic. We'll see. Crazier things have happened. So before we let you go, before I sign off, where can people find you? Well, actually, first, last words, and then where can people find you?
Well, I guess last words are just, I appreciate you inviting me on here, Adam. You know, I love to talk esports. I can talk about this. I just had that podcast with Michael Stevens that I did, and we talked for 2.5 hours on that podcast. We could have went for 2.5 hours more, right? So I love coming here, talking about these different things. And so, I just appreciate the invitation. I hope to do this again here very soon, where we can have some more topics, more things to talk about.
We'll wait for the next spicy
we might have things in the pipeline that you and I are both involved in as well. So
it is ending. Thank you. Aquinas Esports hopping in chat. Riley is. Yeah, you're catching the end of it, but the VOD will be available on here and on YouTube. But I want to just piggyback off of what you said. Like, from my perspective, we've heard enough from the 10 people who are on every panel. So when I want to ask on a special guest or somebody to talk about a certain topic, I want to find somebody that is actually doing it right now. And because I think you bring a valuable perspective, and your learnings are just as important, or if not better, than some of the other people who are constantly on panels. And I'm so sick of hearing and seeing the same names. And maybe that's me now. Maybe everyone's sick of hearing me and seeing my name on everything. But, you know, if that's you and you're sick of it, go start your own Twitch channel and I'll watch. But
apparently I have to get, my teams into 4 or 5 different leagues. And
that's the problem. Yeah.
I've been doing it all wrong, Adam. I got to get the brand out there more.
You got to work more. I don't know. No, I appreciate you stopping by, and I like having you. I mean, when we start talking about starting a new program, I mean, there's not many people out there who've done it twice or 1.5 times. Now that I think about, but we're kind of there that we've done it kind of the most out there at this point, which is scary. Right? Yeah, absolutely. Very different institutions, very different situations. And I think there's, and like we said, like earlier, is you can't just use the same thing at every institution. Like, you got to know your own institution. Everything's different. But I appreciate you coming on. Where can people find you? Yeah.
So speaking of the brand, I encourage everybody to follow Grand Valley's brand new socials. It's at GVSU Esports on both Twitter and on Instagram. So go follow us there. For my personals, I'm at Coach Bilski on Twitter, and then at Coach_Bilski on Instagram. So throw me a
Nice.
follow, hit you with the follow back, and yeah, hopefully we get back on here again soon. Thank you for letting me be your special guest
Yeah,
tonight.
absolutely. Thanks, Coach Bilski, for joining. Thank you, everybody who stopped by. You guys are awesome. Special shout out again, as I do every week, Andrew Vinavich. He did all my custom overlays. He's a student over at Aquinas College. Give him a follow if you want. He's awesome. Thank you, everybody, for the follows, for participating, and we will talk next week. Thanks, guys.